In a world where every hammer strike on steel can cost a life, I learned to read people as precisely as I read metal. But even a master of his craft can one day miss the fracture that will destroy everything he's built for years. And when betrayal enters your home wearing the mask of a business partner, you realize the most dangerous blade isn't the one in your hands, but the one pointed at your back. They say a man's craft reveals his character. After 20 years of forging Japanese swords, I've learned that every imperfection tells a story. Every flaw has its origin. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. A man who crafts katanas for a living should notice when something's off balance, when the weight shifts in his own home. But sometimes we're blind to what's right in front of us, especially when we don't want to see it. My name is Darrell Blackwood. I'm 45, and I've dedicated my life to perfecting the ancient art of Japanese sword making. That dedication to precision and detail made me one of the most respected craftsmen in America. The irony doesn't escape me. How I could read the smallest flaw in a blade, but miss the cracks forming in my own marriage. Maybe I was too focused on the forge, too consumed by the dance of hammer and steel to notice my own life losing its temper. I met Akiko at a martial arts exhibition in San Francisco 12 years ago. The memory is still vivid. The polished wooden floors of the exhibition hall, the reverent hush of the crowd, and her. She was demonstrating advanced kendo techniques, her movements as precise as the blades I forged. Her black hair was pulled back tight, her face a mask of concentration that broke into an unexpected smile when our eyes met. Within a year, we were married, combining our passions into what I thought was the perfect partnership. She opened her dojo in Seattle's Japantown, teaching traditional martial arts, while I continued my craft in the workshop behind our craftsman-style house in the quiet suburbs. The first signs appeared, so gradually I almost missed them. Akiko had always been dedicated to fitness, but suddenly she was spending extra hours at the dojo, coming home later and later. The scent of incense and training mats gave way to expensive perfume. She started wearing new workout gear, high-end stuff she said she needed for professional appearances. Then came the changes in her attitude, subtle at first, like a hairline fracture in steel. She stopped joining me for our traditional Sunday morning tea ceremony, claiming she needed extra time to prepare for classes. At the annual martial arts convention in Portland last month, I noticed how she lit up when Wade Sterling, a prominent collector of ancient weapons, praised her demonstration. He was everything I wasn't: flashy, outspoken, with the kind of money that allowed him to buy the artifacts I spent months crafting. His custom-tailored suit and gold Rolex screamed new money, but he knew enough about Japanese weapons to be dangerous. I caught them talking about private lessons and exclusive demonstrations, but like a fool, I dismissed my concerns. What could a collector offer that a master craftsman couldn't? The breaking point came during a dinner with friends at the Golden Dragon, our favorite spot in Japantown. Akiko's phone buzzed, and I caught a glimpse of Wade's name before she quickly turned it face down. She excused herself, claiming it was dojo business. When she returned 15 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed, and she barely touched her sushi. Patricia Wong, our ever-observant neighbor, shot me a knowing look that made my stomach turn. That night, I lay awake in our bedroom, surrounded by the traditional Japanese decor we'd carefully chosen together. My craftsman's mind cataloged every detail, every change, every strange occurrence of the past few months. The truth was forming like a pattern in folded steel, but I wasn't ready to acknowledge it. Not yet. The ancient scrolls on our wall spoke of honor and tradition, values I'd built my life around. But sometimes, tradition isn't enough to hold things together, and honor can blind you to betrayal. I've always taught my apprentices that you must trust your instincts when working with steel. The metal speaks to you, if you know how to listen. Now, my instincts were screaming at me, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. The annual Japanese weapons exhibition in downtown Seattle was where things started becoming clearer. Wade Sterling's booth was the centerpiece, displaying his collection of rare katanas. I watched from across the hall as he gestured animatedly, explaining the history of a Muromachi period blade to a group of enthusiasts. His designer suit and perfectly manicured hands had never known the heat of a forge or the weight of a hammer. My son Kevin, just 7 years old, tugged at my sleeve during the demonstration. "Dad, Why was Mr. Sterling at our house yesterday? Mom said he came for some papers, but they were in the dojo for a long time. The question hit me like a blade to the gut. I hadn't been home. I was delivering a commission piece to a client in Portland. Later that week, Patricia Wong cornered me while I was working in my forge. She'd been our neighbor for 5 years, always too interested in everyone's business. Derek, she said, her voice dripping with false concern, I've been meaning to talk to you about Akiko. I've seen her and Mr. Sterling having lunch at that new sushi place on 3rd Street. Several times, actually. They seemed close. She paused, watching my reaction. I'm sure it's nothing, just business meetings, but the forge suddenly felt too hot, too confining. I thanked Patricia and turned back to my work, but my hands were shaking. The steel I was working on cooled too quickly, developing stress fractures. Just like my marriage, I thought bitterly. That evening, during our weekly family dinner, Akiko was more distant than usual. She kept checking her phone under the table, thinking I wouldn't notice. When I asked about Wade's visit, she brushed it off. He's interested in sponsoring some advanced training programs at the dojo, she said, not meeting my eyes. It could be a great opportunity. Winston Morrison, my oldest friend and fellow craftsman, called me the next day. Listen, Derek, I was at the Dragon's Pearl yesterday, and I saw something you should know about. He hesitated. Akiko was there with Sterling. They weren't exactly sitting on opposite sides of the table, if you know what I mean. The pieces were falling into place, each one sharper than the last. The late nights at the dojo, the new clothes, the secretive phone calls, and now, Wade Sterling showing up at my house when I wasn't around. The pattern was clear, like the grain in well-folded steel, but I needed to be certain before I acted. A master swordsmith never strikes until the moment is perfect. The day everything fell apart started like any other. I had a meeting scheduled with a collector in Vancouver about a commissioned Tonto blade, but he called to cancel at the last minute. Something about a family emergency. I should have been annoyed, but instead, I felt an odd sense of relief. I could head home early, maybe surprise Akiko, and take her to lunch. The spring rain was falling steadily as I drove back through Seattle's winding streets. Our house, a traditional craftsman with the separate dojo building behind it, looked peaceful in the misty afternoon light. Akiko's car was in the driveway, which was unusual. She normally taught advanced classes at this hour. The front door was unlocked. Another oddity. In our house, we followed traditional Japanese customs strictly. Doors were always secured, shoes always removed, spaces always organized. Akiko, I called out, slipping off my boots in the entryway. No answer, but I heard faint sound coming from the dojo. Walking through the garden path to the dojo, I noticed Wade Sterling's Mercedes parked around the corner, partially hidden by the cherry trees I'd planted when we first moved in. My heart began pounding against my ribs, but my feet moved forward with the same deliberate precision I use when approaching my forge. The dojo's sliding door was closed, but not completely. Through the gap, I could see the afternoon light playing on the polished wooden floors, the wall of ancient weapons I'd restored gleaming dully in the background. And there they were, Akiko and Wade, on the training mats. But they weren't training. For a moment, I stood frozen, my craftsman's hands gripping the doorframe. Akiko was straddling him, her head thrown back in a laugh I'd never heard before. Wade's hands were on her hips, his expensive suit jacket tossed carelessly over my weapons display. The setup is perfect, Wade was saying, his voice smug. Your husband's too busy with his precious swords to notice anything. And when I open the new dojo chain, you'll be the star instructor. Akiko's response cut deeper than any blade could. Derek lives in the past, with his traditional methods and old-world mindset. You understand the future, Wade. You understand me. I didn't realize I'd slid the door fully open until they both turned to look at me. The sound it made was like a sword being drawn from its scabbard, a whisper of approaching violence. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, like metal suspended between hammer strikes. The three of us stood in a triangle of tension, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the dojo floor. Wade scrambled to his feet first, trying to maintain his cool guy facade while fumbling with his clothes. What a joke. All that expensive swagger gone in the blink of an eye. Derek, Akiko started, her voice shaking. This isn't. We were just. Save it. I cut her off, my voice as cold as quenching oil. The rage inside me was building like heat in the forge, but I've spent decades learning to control fire. How long has this little song and dance been going on? Wade, the smug bastard, actually had the nerve to step forward, straightening his designer tie. Listen, Blackwood, let's handle this like reasonable men. These things happen, you know. I crossed the dojo floor in 3 strides. 20 years of hammer work have given me arms like steel cables. I grabbed his tie and pulled him close. Reasonable men don't sneak around with other men's wives, I growled. And they definitely don't do it in my dojo. Derek, stop. Akiko grabbed my arm. You're acting like some kind of barbarian. I released Wade, turned to face my wife. Barbarian? That's rich coming from someone who just threw away 15 years of marriage for this snake in an Armani suit. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Tell me, was it worth it? Trading our life for his promises. The sound of car doors slamming outside made us all freeze. Through the dojo windows, I could see Patricia Wong getting out her car, phone already in hand. Behind her, other neighbors were gathering, drawn by the commotion. I'm calling the police. Patricia's voice carried through the walls. Our private disaster was about to become the neighborhood's primetime entertainment. Akiko's face went pale. Dara, please. We can talk about this privately. We don't need to air our dirty laundry in front of everyone. Now you're worried about privacy? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Should have thought about that before turning our dojo into your personal love nest. Within minutes, sirens approached. Officer Martinez, who'd bought a Tonto for me last year, will be first on the scene. Wade made another move for the door. The police are coming. Let's all just calm down. Through the window, more neighbors gathered. Mrs. Chun from across the street was already on her phone, probably spreading the news to the whole block. Our life was unraveling like a poorly folded steel blade. Derek, Akiko tried again, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for this to happen. Things just got out of hand. Got out of hand. I gestured around the dojo, like accidentally burning yourself on a forge. No, this was a choice. Every secret meeting, every lie, every time you brought him into our home, those were all choices. Officer Martinez's voice came from outside. Mr. Blackwood? Everything okay in there? I looked at my wife, then at Wade, his expensive suit now wrinkled and stained from the training mat. The perfect metaphor. All that flashy exterior couldn't hold up under real pressure. No, I called back, my voice steady. Everything is definitely not okay. After the police left, I spent the night at Winston's place. My old friend didn't ask many questions. He just handed me a bottle of Sunnery whiskey and sat with me in his garage workshop. The familiar smell of metal and oil brought some comfort, but my mind kept replaying the afternoon's events like a broken record. There's something you need to know about Sterling, Winston said finally, setting down his glass. Remember Jason Chin's custom blades? The shop that went under last year. I nodded, taking another sip. Jason had been a promising young bladesmith, until his business mysteriously collapsed. What about it? Well, I did some digging. Winston pulled out his laptop. Turns out Wade Sterling was involved. He approached Jason with a partnership deal, promised to franchise his workshop, make it big time. Sound familiar? My hand tightened around the glass. Go on. Sterling got Jason to sign over partial ownership of his business. Then he started making changes, cheaper materials, mass production methods. When Jason protested, Sterling forced him out. Used some fine print in the contract to take everything. I remember Jason's wife at last year's Craftsman's Guild meeting, telling everyone they were moving back to Taiwan. The shame in her eyes made sense now. That's not all, Winston continued, pulling up more documents. Sterling's done this before. 3 other traditional martial arts dojos in the past 5 years. Always the same pattern. Find a successful small business, promises expansion, then takes control and commercializes everything. My blood ran cold as I remembered Wade's words in the dojo. When I open the new dojo chain, you'll be the star instructor. The bastard had been playing the same game with Akiko. He targets businesses with traditional values. Winston explained, showing me a pattern of lawsuits and bankruptcies. Places where the owners care more about craft than contracts. Then he turns them into McDojos. Quick profits over quality. I thought about my own workshop, the traditions I preserved, the skills passed down through generations. Had that been Sterling's real target all along? Was Akiko just his way in? A text message lit up my phone. Akiko, please come home. We need to talk. I can explain everything. There's more, Winston said grimly. Remember that collector in Vancouver who canceled on you today? I called him. He never had a meeting scheduled with you. The pieces clicked into place. Sterling had arranged for me to be away, probably through one of his connections in the collector community. The whole thing had been orchestrated. I opened my laptop and started searching. Sterling's pattern became clear. He'd done this in other cities too. San Francisco, Portland, Los Angeles. Small traditional martial arts schools and crafts workshops, all transformed into soulless commercial operations. Look at this, Winston pointed to a news article. 2 years ago, he was sued by a knife maker in Oregon. Similar story. Promised to help expand the business, started an affair with the owner's wife, then took everything in the divorce settlement. I remember the casual way Sterling had tossed his jacket over my weapons display. The disrespect wasn't just personal, it was his whole business model. Destroy tradition, replace it with cheap imitations, and profit from the ruins. He's got investors lined up. Winston showed me more documents. They're planning to open a chain of authentic Japanese martial arts centers across the West Coast, using traditional names and imagery, but it's all just a front for mass-market garbage. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia Wong. Derek, I'm worried about Akiko. She's not taking this well. Maybe you should come home. But I wasn't done digging. Something about Sterling's past kept nagging at me. I searched deeper, following leads through business registries and court records. Then I found it. His real name wasn't even Sterling. He'd changed it 10 years ago, right after his first business acquisition went bad. Winston, I said, showing him the screen, look at this pattern. Every time he moves in on a new target, he follows the same steps. First, he appears as a customer or collector. Then he identifies weaknesses, usually financial pressures or personal problems. Finally, he strikes when the business owner is most vulnerable. The whiskey bottle was empty now, but my mind was clear. Sterling hadn't just betrayed my marriage. He'd planned to destroy everything I'd spent my life building. And Akiko, had she been a willing participant, or just another victim of his manipulation? What are you going to do? Winston asked, seeing the look in my eyes. I stood up, my decision made. Like any master craftsman, I knew that before you can repair something broken, you first have to understand exactly how it broke. At 7 sharp the next morning, I walked into Linda Maxwell's law office. She'd handled contract work for my custom pieces before, but this was different. She listened without interruption as I laid out the whole mess. The affair, Sterling's history, his plans for my business. You've got more here than just a divorce case, Linda said, spreading files across her desk. Sterling's pattern of predatory business practices gives us leverage, but we need to move fast. I handed her the thumb drive with Winston's research. Everything's here. The lawsuits, the bankruptcies, his name change. He's done this to other craftsmen. Linda's eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the documents. This is gold. He violated several trade practices acts, and using personal relationships to gain business advantage. That's textbook corporate espionage. My phone buzzed. Another text from Akiko. I ignored it. Here's what we're going to do. Linda pulled out fresh paperwork. First, we file for divorce citing adultery and financial manipulation. Then we hit Sterling with a separate lawsuit for business interference and fraud. She outlined the strategy: protect my assets, secure the workshop's ownership, and expose Sterling's pattern of destroying traditional crafts businesses. We'll need statements from his other victims, starting with Jason Shun. I thought of Jason's wife, their shame when they left town. Will they talk? They will when they learn they're not alone, Linda said, reaching for her phone. I know attorneys in 3 states who'd love to take Sterling down. We can build a class action. By noon, the paperwork was filed. Linda's paralegal was already contacting Sterling's other victims, building a network of testimony. The predator was about to become prey. Walking out of Linda's office, I felt like a sword being reforged. The metal had to be broken before it could be remade stronger. My phone lit up again. Akiko had left a voicemail. Derek, please. Wade's lawyers are threatening me. They say if I don't sign some papers, they'll take everything. I didn't know. I didn't understand what he was planning. Please call me back. I played the message for Linda. Classic intimidation tactic, she said. Sterling's trying to pressure her into signing over dojo rights before a lawsuit hits. Don't worry. I've seen this move before. His house of cards is about to collapse. The news hit the craftsman community like a typhoon. Within days of filing the lawsuits, my phone was ringing nonstop. Jason Chin called from Taiwan, eager to testify. 3 other martial arts instructors reached out, sharing similar stories about Sterling's predatory tactics. Even my suppliers were calling, offering support and information. Sterling's carefully built facade was crumbling. The local business journal ran a piece exposing his pattern of destroying traditional arts businesses. His investors started pulling out, spooked by the pending lawsuits. The authentic Japanese martial arts center's project was dead in the water. Then Akiko showed up at my workshop. I was working on a commission wakizashi when I heard the door slide open. She stood there, looking smaller somehow, wearing the plain cotton GI from our early days together. Derek. Her voice was barely a whisper. Can we talk? I kept working, focusing on the steel under my hands. Your lawyer can talk to mine. I'm not here about lawyers. She stepped inside, the familiar scent of green tea and tatama mats following her. I need you to understand. Wade. He manipulated everything. He made me believe you were holding me back, that the dojo needed to evolve. My hammer struck true, sending sparks flying. And you bought every word. I was wrong. Tears streaked her face. When his lawyer showed up with those contracts, demanding I sign over the dojo, I finally saw the truth. He never cared about martial arts. Or me. I set down my tools, studying the blade I was working on. Like any good sword, truth has 2 edges. Did you ever stop to think about what we built together? The traditions we preserved. I forgot who I was, she admitted. Got caught up in his promises of fame and fortune. But that's not why I fell in love with martial arts. Or you. The forge fire crackled in the silence between us. 15 years of marriage, like layers of folded steel, couldn't be unmade in a moment. But they could be irreparably damaged. Linda says we've got them on the ropes, I said finally. Sterling's empire is falling apart. Other victims are coming forward. I'll testify. Akiko straightened her shoulders. About everything. The way he targeted our business. How he planned it all. The other dojos need to know the truth. I looked at her then, really looked. The woman who'd lost her way, but maybe found it again. Too late for us, but maybe not too late for justice. I'm sorry, Derek. She bowed formally, tears falling onto the workshop floor. I betrayed everything we stood for. I can't fix that, but I can help stop him from doing this to others. After she left, I returned to my work. Every strike of the hammer echoed with memory and regret. Some bonds, once broken, can never be reforged. But sometimes, from the fragments, you can still forge something meaningful. 6 months. That's how long it took for everything to be finalized. Linda had warned me divorce proceedings could drag on, but Sterling's mounting legal troubles accelerated things. He was too busy fighting federal investigations to play games with the divorce settlement. The final hearing was scheduled for a crisp October morning. The courthouse corridors were packed with reporters. Sterling's downfall had become big news in the business world. 3 of his former victims had flown in to testify about his predatory practices. Full custody of Kevin, Linda announced, reviewing the settlement papers. The house and workshop are protected. Akiko keeps the dojo, but with a strict non-compete clause preventing any partnership with Sterling. You've won on every front, Derek. I watched Akiko across the courtroom, sitting alone. Her lawyer had jumped ship weeks ago when Sterling's empire started crumbling. The authentic Japanese martial arts center's scheme had attracted federal attention for fraud. Sterling won't be able to touch any traditional arts business again, Linda added. The feds are freezing his assets. Jason Chun and the others are getting restitution. The judge's decision was swift and final. Marriage dissolved. Assets divided. My life's work protected. Kevin would live with me, with Akiko getting supervised visits until she completed counseling. Walking out of the courthouse, I saw Sterling being swarmed by reporters. His designer suit was wrinkled, his swagger gone. The man who tried to destroy tradition for profit was facing multiple federal charges. Mr. Blackwood. A reporter caught up with me. How does it feel to be the one who exposed Wade Sterling's schemes? I thought about the broken pieces of my marriage, the trust that could never be restored. Sometimes you have to break something to see what it's really made of. That evening, I picked up Kevin from my sister's place. He ran to hug me, his small arms tight around my neck. Are we going home now, Dad? Not to the old house, buddy. We've got a new place. But I've set up my workshop there already. Want to help me finish that Tonto blade for Officer Martinez? His eyes lit up. Even at 7, he had a craftsman's heart. Some traditions, at least, would survive. Life has a way of settling into new patterns, like metal finding its proper temper. A year after the divorce, I'd moved into a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood across town. The workshop took up most of the backyard, but Kevin didn't mind. He spent hours watching me work, learning the basics of blade maintenance, his young face serious with concentration. The craftsman community had rallied around us in ways I never expected. Orders increased after the Sterling scandal broke, with collectors specifically seeking out traditional artisans. My waiting list stretched 2 years now. Even Jason Chun had returned from Taiwan, opening a new shop with some of the restitution money. He'd stopped by last week, bringing tea and stories of other craftsmen fighting back against commercialization. One crisp morning, while teaching Kevin how to polish a blade properly, Winston stopped by with his usual unannounced visit. He carried a newspaper under his arm, his face brightening at the sight of my son's careful work. You heard the news? Sterling got 15 years. Federal prosecutors threw the book at him. They're even investigating his previous business dealings in California. I nodded, guiding Kevin's hands along the steel, showing him how to feel for imperfections. Linda mentioned it yesterday. Said the judge called him a systematic destroyer of cultural heritage. Called his business model a form of cultural vandalism. How's Akiko doing with her supervised visits? Winston settled onto his usual bench, the one he'd helped me forge brackets for when I set up the new workshop. Better, I admitted, carefully wiping down a blade. The counseling helped more than I expected. She's teaching at a small dojo downtown, focusing on traditional styles again. Kevin enjoys their time together. They're practicing basic kata forms now. Winston watched us work for a moment, his experienced eyes noting Kevin's improving technique. You know, there's a new student interested in apprenticing. Former corporate lawyer who quit after seeing what happened with Sterling. Says she wants to help preserve traditional crafts instead of destroying them. Could be an interesting perspective to have around. I considered it while adjusting the angle of Kevin's polishing cloth. I hadn't taken an apprentice since before the divorce, but maybe it was time. Send her by next week. No promises, but I'll talk to her. Might be good for Kevin to see someone else learning from scratch too. That evening, after Kevin was asleep in his new room decorated with carefully mounted practice blades, I sat in my workshop looking at an old photo. Akiko and I at our wedding, both in traditional dress, full of hopes and plans. The pain had dulled, like an old blade that would never be sharp again, but could still tell its story. My latest commission sat on the workbench, a ceremonial tanto for a museum in Kyoto. They'd specifically requested it after hearing about the Sterling case, wanting to support traditional craftsmanship. The blade caught the workshop lights, its surface reflecting the changes in my life. Sometimes, I realized, you have to lose everything to remind people what's worth preserving. Kevin had left his practice piece next to mine, his first attempt at polishing. The work was rough, unpracticed, but the dedication was there. Like the steel we worked with, life could be reforged. Different from the original, but strong in its own way. Looking at his efforts, I felt a new kind of pride emerging, as pure as properly folded steel. 2 years after the divorce, the cherry trees I planted in my new backyard bloomed for the first time. Kevin, now 9, helped me set up chairs for the garden party, a small celebration marking the completion of my first apprentice's training. Sarah, the former corporate lawyer turned bladesmith, had proven to be a natural. Her legal background gave her a unique perspective on preserving traditional crafts. She'd already helped 3 other artisans protect their workshops from commercial takeovers. The party brought together an unlikely group. Jason Chun and his wife flew in from Taiwan. Winston brought his famous sake collection. Even Linda Maxwell took time from her busy practice to attend. The craftsman community had grown stronger since the Sterling scandal, forming a network of mutual support and protection. Akiko came too, arriving with a traditional tea set, her first student's work. After completing counseling, she'd rebuilt her reputation teaching authentic martial arts. She and Kevin had found a new rhythm in their relationship, bound by respect for tradition rather than obligation. Remember what you taught me about steel, Dad? Kevin asked, carefully showing Sarah's daughter the proper way to hold a practice blade, how it has to go through fire to become stronger. I nodded, watching the next generation embrace our craft. The boy who'd witnessed his family break apart had emerged wiser, like a blade tempered by adversity. The museum in Kyoto had commissioned 3 more pieces, impressed by how the sterling case had highlighted the importance of traditional craftsmanship. Other cultural institutions followed suit. We weren't just preserving techniques anymore. We were teaching the world why they mattered. Sterling himself was old news now. Last I heard, he was serving his sentence while writing a memoir about his misunderstood vision. Nobody in our circles cared. We were too busy building something real, something that would last. That evening, after the guests left, Kevin and I sat in the workshop. He worked on his latest project, a small knife he'd designed himself. His techniques were improving, but more importantly, he understood the spirit behind the craft. "Think we'll ever see another guy like Sterling?" he asked, testing the blade's balance. "Probably," I replied, checking his work. "There will always be people who value profit over tradition. But now we know how to spot them, how to stop them." Looking around the workshop, at the tools passed down through generations and the new ones we'd added, I felt a deep sense of peace. Life, like the finest steel, finds its true strength not in remaining unchanged, but in adapting while keeping its essential nature intact.